You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Lebanese ministers meet for an ordinary cabinet session despite a continuing boycott by Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil. The U.S. military launches cruise missile strikes to knock out 3 coastal raider sites in areas of Yemen controlled by Houthi rebel forces in retaliation for missile attacks at its Navy ship. And Thailand's King Bhumibol Adulyadej, the world's longest reigning monarch, passes away. Lebanese ministers have met for an ordinary cabinet session despite a continuing boycott by Foreign Affairs Minister Gibran Bassil. Before entering the Grand Sarai, his fellow party member and Education Minister Ilyes Boussab told reporters that the Free Patriotic Movement leader will not be attending as the situation remains the same as previous sessions. Bassil, Boussab and Allied Energy Minister Arthur Nazarian began boycotting cabinet meetings in late August in protest of the extension of the terms of senior military officials, as well as what they say is the marginalization of Christians in key positions. During the meeting, Prime Minister Tamam Slam reportedly called on ministers to agree on a state budget so that it could be referred to Parliament. Lebanon has not approved a state budget since 2005 due to obstructive political wrangling among rival factions. The Lebanese government has agreed to provide financial compensation worth around 10 billion Lebanese pounds to help Arsal farmers who have been unable to harvest their fields because of the security situation on the border. Dozens of farmers from the northeastern border village gathered for the second time this week outside the Grand Sarai as ministers were meeting. Ministers also agreed to compensate chicken farmers with nearly $400,000 because of losses due to a bird flu, according to Labour Minister Sejan Azi, who read out the cabinet statement at the end of the meeting. The Free Patriotic Movement has announced its plans to commemorate the 26th War of Liberation anniversary, with a large march set to take place along the road leading to the presidential Babda Palace. A statement released by the party's media office said FPM leader Gibran Bassil will place wreaths at memorials and tombs of fallen soldiers during the commemoration set for Sunday. He is scheduled to stop at Martyr Square in Hadas, south of Beirut, as well as several Mount Lebanon towns. October 13th marks the day the Syrian army stormed the presidential palace in 1990, forcing FPM founder Michel Aoun, who was army commander at the time, to leave the building and take refuge at the French embassy before being exiled to France. The Syrian government has partially approved a UN aid plan for October, but not its request to deliver urgently needed supplies to the rebel-held part of Aleppo. Damascus has given a green light for convoys to 25 of 29 besieged and hard-to-reach areas across Syria, but not to eastern Aleppo and 3 parts of the rural Damascus province. Ramzi Azzeldin Ramzi, Deputy UN Special Envoy for Syria, confirmed receipt of the approvals after a weekly meeting of the Humanitarian Task Force composed of major and regional powers. He gave no details. U.S. singer and songwriter Bob Dylan is awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. That's coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. The U.S. military has launched cruise missile strikes to knock out 3 coastal raider sites in areas of Yemen controlled by Houthi rebel forces in retaliation for missile attacks at its Navy ship. The strikes, authorized by President Barack Obama, represent Washington's first direct military action against Houthi-controlled targets in Yemen's conflict. The Pentagon said these strikes were aimed at raiders that enabled the launch of at least 3 missiles against the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Mason since Sunday. U.S. officials identified the areas in Yemen where the raiders were targeted as near Ras Isa, north of Muha, and near Khoha. German authorities are under pressure to explain how a detained Syrian man suspected of planning an airport bombing attack was able to take his own life, with politicians demanding answers and calling the death in custody a fiasco and a tragedy. Sebastian Gemko, Saxony's justice minister, said in a press conference in Dresden that Jaber al-Bakr, 22, strangled himself on Wednesday evening by tying his shirt to the bars of his jail cell. German authorities are still investigating whether Bakr had accomplices. Around 70 Africans are seeking to enter Europe successfully entered the Spanish enclave of Melilla. A total of 400 were reported to have attempted to make a rush on the triple barrier that divides Melilla from Morocco. The attempt to cross into Spanish territory took place early this morning, and migrants seeking to cross into European territory attempted to do so in groups along different parts of the border. And still on the topic, a handful of migrant families who have been living in the Calais jungle camp depart on buses for reception centers in France ahead of the camp's dismantling by the French government. Nathan Frandino reports.
In the Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle, they're packing their bags. With the French government set to dismantle the camp, many residents are preparing to resettle in reception centers across France. Nasir, a migrant from Afghanistan, says he and his family didn't want to wait for the bulldozers to move in.
In France, we are just in a bad situation. We want just a life, nothing more.
The jungle has become a dark symbol of Europe's struggle to respond to the migrant crisis. It's a place Nasir says he's happy to leave behind.
There is nothing. There is just jungle, and jungle is for animals.
The government plans to relocate migrants in small groups around the country. It's the government's solution for now, though no one knows how well it will work or how long it will last.
Across the Atlantic, the UN calls for $119 million to bring life-saving assistance to ravaged southwestern Haiti, where the death toll in the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew keeps rising. The hurricane has killed over 1,000 people in Haiti, where tens of thousands have lost their homes and some 1.4 million are in need of humanitarian assistance. Gavino Gare reports.
World Food Program distributions are among the first aid operations deployed in the impoverished Caribbean nation after Hurricane Matthew. Survivors in the city of Lecce, located in the hardest hit southwestern peninsula, had their lives demolished.
I don't have a home. All my things went with the water. I'm going to give birth this month. I have nothing.
We can't take it anymore. There's no other place for us to go to, nowhere to sleep.
But food distribution is not enough. Haiti's children are left without schools. The UN says some $119 million is needed to bring life-saving assistance to the hundreds of thousands still suffering. And the death count keeps rising. With at least 1,000 people killed and the reported spread of cholera, they need help fast.
The UN has slammed Haiti authorities and the international community for failing to prevent hundreds of deaths when Hurricane Matthew hit the island. The UN's chief for disaster management, Robert Glasser, said it was outrageous and truly unacceptable that the early warning system was not adequate.
I find it truly outrageous and unacceptable that we can have a country like Haiti in which we've had those of us outside of Haiti are watching on TV even days before this storm hit, and that it was impossible to reach people with early warning, or the early warning that was provided because of lack of training and community education was not acted on. It is really outrageous that we are still in a situation where that can happen in a country like Haiti, particularly a country that has just recently experienced a devastating earthquake in which, one of the clear lessons was about preparation and codes and a variety of other issues. Of course, it's challenging in a country like Haiti for reasons of governance and poverty more general. more generally, but there are clear steps that need to happen, and we really need, this is the last time we should have this sort of situation. Haiti itself, its leadership, the community, donors have to come together now and make sure that these systems, these basic systems, are in place so that we're not experiencing another disaster like this in the next years, couple of years, because they will occur, and they will occur increasingly rapidly as a result of climate change. If you look at weather and climate-related disasters over this period of time, first of all, they've more than doubled in the last 20 years, the weather and climate-related disasters. And secondly, that in 15 of the last 20 years, weather-related events have been the main cause of mortality, of loss of life in disasters.
Thousands of people have marched in cities across Colombia to demand a peace deal between the government and leftist rebels not to be scuttled. The demonstrations mark the second time in a week that Colombians took to the streets to support the accord signed last month with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, known as FARC, and now hanging by a thread after a shock referendum defeat for the deal. Thailand's King Bhumibol Adulyadej, the world's longest reigning monarch, has passed away. He had been in unstable condition after receiving hemodialysis treatment. The king was credited with restoring the influence of Thailand's royalty during 70 years on the throne and earning the devotion of many of his subjects. For the majority of the country's 68 million people, the king was a pillar of stability in rapidly changing times. Australian police have charged two 16-year-old boys with planning an imminent Islamic State-inspired terror attack. The two teenagers who were arrested in a western suburb of Sydney were found to be carrying two knives. The police said the exact target of their alleged plot is unknown. Police were reportedly aware of the two teenagers before their arrest. Local media reported one of the boys is the son of a man convicted of terror offenses. U.S. singer and songwriter Bob Dylan has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. The Swedish Academy announced its decision today, drawing to a close the 2016 Nobel season. Dylan's surprise win marked the first time the prestigious award was bestowed to someone primarily seen as a musician. The 74-year-old songwriter had been mentioned in the Nobel speculation for years, but few experts expected the Academy to extend the award to a genre such as pop music. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Lebanese ministers meet for an ordinary cabinet session despite a continuing boycott by Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil. The U.S. military launches cruise missile strikes to knock out 3 coastal radar sites in areas of Yemen controlled by Houthi rebel forces in retaliation for missile attacks at its Navy ship. And Thailand's King Bhumibol Adulyadej, the world's longest reigning monarch, passes away. Those are your top stories for this Thursday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I thank you all for tuning in this afternoon.